Great. Hi. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me. I'm really excited to dive into the data.
Cool.
One thing I'm really excited about is that you did a lot of the pre-work yourself, so there should be a really quick meeting. What I love about the work is that you submitted it 24 hours advance, 2 from each category.
Yeah.
And from the last couple times we've met, like your big push has been like selecting student work that really will highlight the error, because sometimes we select student work and you're just like, it's wrong, but how does it feed into the bigger trend?
Right.
And I really think that the student work you selected this time is gonna be amazing. Also, congrats on the results from the last interim. That's awesome. I know it's been rough the last couple ones, but going from 50% on your last module to hitting 75% mastery on this module is great, especially since so much of it's looping. And so this was our last interim, our last assessment, our last module before state testing, so I'm really excited to dive in with this with you today. So let's go ahead, and before we look at student work, let's go back to the chart that we made at the beginning. For the standard, we read just the wording of the standard. I know when we made it, we were rushing, but
Relate volume to the operations of multiplication and addition to solve real-world problems and mathematical problems involving volume.
Great, yeah. And so in all of the work samples that we're gonna dive into, like we can see, like, and we have them here, and I want to kind of see your success a little bit, is like, what is something that no matter how wrong some of your low students were, that every single student had in their work?
They could all multiply.
They all knew that they were multiplying.
Yes, they were multiplying. They all put the volume formula, because that's what we were really focused on. So they wrote volume equals length times width.
So where is that here?
So we have the volume represented in the amount of space. And
here it is.
Yeah.
The formula every time. Yes.
Duh.
So that's awesome. So like no matter how wrong students were, they had the formula every time they calculated volume. What else did they all have that you wanted them to show?
They all put their cubic units at the end.
Yes.
They have that. Yes.
Yes.
So they knew they were where they were multiplying 3 numbers.
Yes. And then here it's hard to see their outline because we have their work, but they were on the computer. It was on the computer, so we couldn't do that. Work and grouping. Did we see evidence of work and grouping in our student work, where like students were grouping numbers?
I did see one student here in our high. We have him right here. He grouped the first 2 numbers after he changed them into improper fractions.
So for our highs, they both grouped.
Yes.
For our middles,
not so much.
There was a grouping there.
Just one little grouping, but it didn't really show like why. It's just they just grouped something. There was no method behind it.
And then our lows actually,
they grouped, looks like whole numbers and numbers.
Yeah,
I wonder why.
But so there was some level of grouping. Either they were right or wrong, they understood that they had to group. So like there's definitely a lot of success in seeing that, like, of the things they could show, almost all kids did show it, which is great. So what we're going to do today is we're going to dive into what the most common misconception, because this was the most missed question on the exam given, and kind of dive into, okay, what is the misconception? How do we fix it? And then what the reteach is going to look like. So what I want to do right now is I want to dive into your exemplar, which I have right here for you. Thank you for sending that to me. And as we go through this, I want us to be able to add to this chart. So if there's anything that comes up, I want to add to it. So I want to go through and I want to look at your exemplar, and I want you to compare it to our 2 high samples that you gave me. And I want you to tell me what you notice is similar or different, or things that you might want to add to your exemplar.
I noticed that this student here, both of them grouped.
I made sure their names were present, so you could use their names if you need to.
I noticed Thomas. He did it like I did it, where he grouped the first 2 after changing the mixed numbers into improper fractions. And we both, I used method 2, and he looked like he used method 1 where he just multiplied straight across, which is still correct. And then he used method 2 after he multiplied the first two numbers, which was really good. So he kind of simplified and noticed, okay, I can cross out my 6s. Anaya, she also grouped, and she looks like she tried to do. Oh no, she did do method 2. She crossed out her 6 and her 2, and then went on to multiply times 8/3, and she did it again, method 2. So she did method 2 consistently throughout.
So
and
is there,
he did it once.
Yeah. So is there any like strong differences between what the two high students did and what you did?
Not really. No, both did method 2, which simplifies the numbers and makes them smaller. That's a great method.
And they both also did what?
They brought down their cubic units.
Yeah, and they grouped.
And they grouped, yes.
So they grouped, and they used method 2, which was the method for simplifying fractions before we multiply, by seeing that those cross reducing skills. Great. So now let's go ahead and let's look at at the high student work to the middle student work. And so we have Justin and Akeem here. So what are the biggest differences you realize between the high students and the middle students?
What I noticed is they have more steps, which I find to be really weird that they didn't change the numbers first, the improper fractions, the mixed numbers and improper fractions. And it looks like Akeem just tried to multiply his whole numbers, and he forgot that fraction there. So he's like, nope, I'm just going to see whole numbers, I'm just going to group those, multiply those. And then from there, that's what he messed up. He tried to do method 2. So
so both middle students did use some correct methoding. They used the correct methods.
Correct methods, but only multiplied whole numbers and left out that fraction for Akeem. And for Justin, I'm noticing, okay, he changed that. When he multiplied, he didn't multiply straight across. He tried to multiply his numerator times the whole number as well as his denominator times the whole number.
So what did both of them do wrong? So it says that you said that they both used the correct methods, but what did they do? The conceptual methods. But what did they do that was the same?
When they got to that whole number, they didn't multiply properly.
So
Akeem multiplied only the whole number, so 3 times 6, when it was 3.5 times 6.
Okay.
And Justin, he multiplied 6 times 6 by saying 56 times 6 as well as 6 times 6.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So they could not multiply that whole number by that fraction properly.
No. So when we're looking here at our show, it says show fractional and decimal multiplication strategies from our last unit.
Yes.
They showed the strategies, but what is it that you're thinking? Maybe we're gonna have to go back. We're gonna have to look at the lows, but like, what do you think would be the easiest fix for the middles? Like, what would be the biggest bang for your buck if you were to try and correct these middle students?
First thing I need to let them know, we're not adding, because that's what it looks like. They're just trying to group like units, and that's what we pushed so much during those last units of adding and subtracting fractions and whole numbers, and just realizing like when it comes to that whole number and multiplying times that fraction, that we're only focused on that numerator and whole number, because technically if you change the whole number into a fraction, it's that whole number over 1. So it's still multiplying straight across technically.
Okay.
It's just understanding that numerator and that denominator, that denominator and that whole number.
Okay. So now we're going to move the middles over here, and we're going to put the lows here. We've got Pedro and Ari. So let's compare what Pedro and Ari did. Again, there's a lot of success. They both did what?
Both of them were able to multiply, but just not correctly in the right way.
Okay, so what is the... So let's compare
to the middle.
To the middles. Yeah.
I can see that they're also trying to group like units, just like how we did with adding. And that's what Pedro did. He grouped all those whole numbers and his fractions, separated them, then went back and tried to multiply those together, thinking, okay, if I did it in adding, I could do it with this, which is not the case. And probably because we're always saying multiplication is repeated addition, so that could play a role.
So is that a conceptual error that when we have units, we group them together all the time?
I think so, because just with saying like units, they automatically think, okay, I can do that with everything, which is not true. It's when you're doing different operations, rules apply to different things.
Okay.
And with Ari, she did what looks like Akeem did, which is multiplying only the whole numbers and forgetting that fraction.
Okay. So we have both middle students that you picked had the same mistake as one of your lows. And what was that mistake?
Which is only multiplying like units. The whole numbers times whole numbers and the fractions times fractions.
Okay. So if we could add anything to our chart for show, what would it be?
For show, first thing we need to see is them turning those mixed numbers into improper fractions.
Okay. So I'm gonna write mixed numbers into improper.
And that takes away that whole number thing
Uh-huh.
that they keep getting confused with. So now that whole number's out of the picture. And so now you're just stuck with that 6 times, now we have, looks like 9/3. Yeah. No. Yeah, 7/3. My brain is not working.
It's fine, don't worry about it. But this is, but they did that. So we have that here in Justin's. He ends up doing all of the fractions by fractions first. And then, so the mixed numbers into improper fractions, most of the middle and low are covered. But Justin is an outlier because so I'm going to push you a little bit on your thinking. I think that's right. That's more of a procedural thing, that we need students that when we're multiplying, we want improper fractions, and then we'll turn them back into mixed numbers. And you see some of them, like even Justin did some long division to put it back into a mixed number. But, so you're right, but you've hit this a few times. What mixed numbers into improper fractions is going to stop the bleed, but like what's going to fix the wound? And I want you to pay specific attention to Justin's paper, because Justin did turn his into impropers.
He did.
What's the big thing that's gonna stop the wound?
That big thing that's gonna
You mentioned it. You said 3 of them did this.
I want to say those methods that we've been using.
That's back to fractional strategies.
I see it. It's kind of like wording it is like the issue.
Well, you circle it on the paper.
Right here.
Okay. So what is the problem with that?
Because they're seeing that 6 right there. They're thinking, okay, I have to multiply by everything.
Yes.
But this is what I need them to multiply. The numerator times that whole number.
Yeah. So what's that concept? Is that when you're multiplying a fraction by a whole number?
That's where that repeated addition comes in. I'm saying 6 copies of that. So 6 copies of that 6. And I'm saying I'm adding that number 6 times. And our denominator does not change when we're doing that.
Okay, so they need to know that when you multiply, I'm just gonna shorthand this, a fraction by a whole, that your denominator / units are equal. They say the same.
Yes, they say the same.
And that then they would show that by when they're doing their work, they would only multiply when you're multiplying a fraction by a whole, you multiply your whole by your numerator.
Yes.
Okay. So it looks like we've added to our chart, and I think if that would have been on our chart earlier, we might have been able to stop some of these mistakes. So we've done a lot of work on analyzing it and comparing data. What we're going to do now is we're going to draft a plan for a reteach.
Okay.
We know that for our reteach, we have 3 options. What's your favorite? I know you always have a favorite. What's your favorite?
I like charting the error.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, versus you're really big on charting the error. So if charting the error, we have just the straight model,
Yes.
and then we have the it was like a the guided discourse, which was a lot of show calling and walking through common misconceptions.
Right.
So, which of the 3 do you think you would want to use to address the error that you've been seeing of turning mixed numbers into improper fractions when we're multiplying, and multiplying, make sure that when you're multiplying by a whole number that you're multiplying you're multiplying just the numerator. You're not multiplying the denominator. The units aren't changing.
I definitely want to focus on the one about the whole number by numerator.
Yes. And what's interesting about this is this actually is not the standard. So what caught us up in this assessment was that we actually wove another standard into here. And we acknowledged this in our original no-show of like, hey, the standard's going to pop up. But we didn't go as in-depth with it as we could have, which is why it's our common error. It wasn't even on our chart.
But standards have so many layers. I feel like you still have to hit those other standards to kind of like you said, wind it down.
But like what's cool is everything that was on here, even the lowest kid did.
Right.
So it's just what wasn't here is what they couldn't do. So we have to make sure that next time when we plan for our next unit that we're really diving in, especially since this is our last one, that like we're making sure we don't just like cite or name standards, that we're actually like going in and being like what specifically about that standard is going to be hit. So what I want to do is I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to come up with your reteach plan. I'm going to also come up with a reteach plan, and we're going to compare, kind of spar with them, figure out which one works the best, and then go ahead, plan, and practice.